Have you ever heard that if you leave water in the freezer for 2 hours, it can instantly turn into ice just by smacking a bottle? Well, I did, and immediately I knew I had to try it because it sounded like a cool experiment. That is, if I could reproduce it. I just wasn't sure if I could until...
Oh my god.
Let me roll back a bit because this took me way too long to get right. At first, I knew I would need purified water, and I wanted to try a few ways to give us options in case one failed. So I tried with distilled water and spring water, poured some into 2 glass bottles, and then froze them on their side for 2 hours. But when I smacked it down on the ground, nothing happened. The bottles were either already frozen solid and icy, or it just didn't turn into ice at all. You guys let me know that maybe it was because I used glass bottles, but none of my options worked. And I had never done this before, so I was not too hopeful that this was really a thing. And trust me, I smacked and knocked that bottle many times, hoping something would happen. However, we all know what happens when you do the same thing over and over again. You get the same results. But if you know me, then you know that I was determined. So I knew I would have to do something different in order to get this right. Some research, some science, you know, women in STEM. And after some trial and error, I figured out what the trick really was to actually get it to work. In all the successful variations of this experiment that I had seen, I took note of the fact that it was usually with Fiji water. So your girl was about to use Fiji water for the flex. But of course I wanted to give us some options, so I headed down to the store and bought a pack of Fiji and a pack of natural spring water, this time in plastic bottles and fun-sized. I didn't want the bottle to be too big, and I wasn't going to transfer it into glass this time. I was going to leave the bottles fully sealed and start the process again that way. Once I got home, I took 5 bottles, okay? 2 Fijis and 2 spring waters, and figured, alright, I'll place 1 Fiji and 1 spring in the freezer for 2 hours, and just in case that failed, I'll place 2 spring and 1 Fiji in the fridge for the day and then place them in the freezer for optimal results. I set the timer for 2 hours, and while I patiently waited, I added 2 skewers of kumquats into the freezer so we could see what would happen if we placed those in the cup with the super cooled water, and I also placed a glass plate in the freezer to see what would happen if I poured the water onto the frozen plate and whether or not that would produce a tall tower of ice when pouring it. And I also had some ice cubes ready to go to try making a tower of ice that way. You know, options. Finally, the time passed. I opened up the freezer and checked out what we were working with. I knew I had to be super gentle when removing them from the freezer because apparently even opening the door could trigger them to turn to ice. Well, that wasn't true. You don't have to be that gentle, but the harder part was knowing what the sweet spot time frame was before the water freezes, but it's somewhere between 2 and 3 hours. I guess it all just